ISO 25,600 at dawn in a cloud forest in the Andes Mountains for bird photography? No problem at all with DxO PureRAW 3. The new version is amazing, but does it have a place in your nature photography workflow? Let's get into it. Hola amigos, I'm Greg Basco, a professional nature photographer and workshop leader based in Latin America. I'm lucky to be able to photograph some really amazing subjects and amazing places, but I'm often dealing with low light, and that means high ISO values. Since the first version of DxO PureRAW was released a few years ago, I've used it to deal with noise on certain special images. That's right. You don't need to use DxO PureRAW for every one of your images. In fact, if you do, you're going to use up a lot of hard disk space and a lot of your time as well. But DxO PureRAW has always done a great job for me for those photos that I really like but that suffer from serious noise. So here's how it works. DxO's proprietary software works to optimize raw files from each camera and lens combination that we photographers could ever dream of using in order to reduce noise, maximize detail, and correct for lens distortions and aberrations. In short, as I understand it, as my small brain understands it, I'm not a software engineer, it reinterprets the raw data to give us the raw files that we always wish we had right from the outset, and that's pretty cool. Version 2 of the software came out about exactly 1 year ago, and now DxO has released PureRAW 3, which promises further improvements. So in this quick video, I want to walk you through a few questions that I'm sure you'll have for this software's potential place in your nature photography workflow. First, we'll take a look at the workflow and interface differences between DxO PureRAW 2 and 3, and second, I'll compare the results of two versions of a super high ISO telephoto shot of a bird to see which one reigns supreme. And third, I'll check whether the new PureRAW 3 does a better job on landscape images, a starry night sky images to be specific. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to hit you with a little bonus content on two fronts. First, if you've ever used DxO PureRAW and noticed that the resulting file is darker than your original RAW file, I'm going to give you a bit of insight on what might or might not be going on. And finally, what is this photo behind me on the monitor? I'll give you a quick rundown on how I took it and the tech specs I used to capture that image. Okay, to the computer. Some of you may be familiar with the workflow for DxO PureRAW 2, but let's run through it quickly just so I can show you how it works. Your first option is the type of processing you want. You want the deep prime, which was formerly the cutting edge. Now it's not anymore. In version 2, you had a couple of options related to sharpening and lens distortion correction, where you want to place your file, and you process it, and there you go. So here it is coming into my Lightroom catalog. It actually imports the file at the current location because it's creating a new raw version of that file saved in DNG format. It automatically makes a collection for you, and if you're not sure where that actually lives on your hard drive, you can go to folder in the library and it'll take you right to that DxO subfolder where it's created the new file. In Lightroom, DxO creates its own subfolder where that newly created DNG file resides, so you might not see it show up right next to your original RAW file. What do you do if that's the case? Simply go to not Edit Greg, but Library and make sure that Show Photos in Subfolders is checked. Here's how the process works in version 3. There are some new options, the most important being Deep Prime XD, the new processing engine that does a fantastic job. There are some new settings related to fine-tuning the sharpness that DxO applies. That's nice. Of course, vignetting, chromatic aberration, lens distortion, and there's some options related to how DxO will in that newly created DNG file in terms of eliminating distortion from your lens, because you might lose a few pixels there. I actually had to read through these a little bit, and I ended up deciding to choose the one that says keep original ratio if there's any cropping done in the image. The cropping is very light, so I wouldn't worry much about this at all. After that, there are some new options actually related to the output format. And now there's an option where you actually could choose in the output format to save as a TIFF, but I would still go as DNG because that's closer to a RAW file in terms of its editing capabilities. And then where you save it, file renaming if you want that, that's all fine, looks good, and off we go. So PureRAW 3 has a few nice interface options that improve our workflow, but what we really want to know is how well it optimizes our RAW files, and importantly, since many of you might already own version 2, does PureRAW version 3 give you significantly better results than the previous version? Let's take a look at the photo I used at the outset of this video, a strong build wood creeper taken in super low light at dawn in an Andean cloud forest. This is a true test of high ISO values and a great case to see what DxO PureRAW 3 can do for bird photos that suffer from a lot of high ISO noise. Here are 3 versions of that strong build wood creeper photo, again taken in super dim conditions. Here's my raw file, the Canon R5, 25,600 ISO in super dark conditions. That's not bad right out of the camera given the situation. Here's the version 2 file. Did a little bit of lens correction. You can see it bowing in and out there. And the version 3 file also did some lens corrections. So what I really want to take a look at is how well does version 3 of DxO compare to version 2. So you have version 2 on the left and version 3 on the right. Let's take a look at the details in there. And I think here DxO PureRAW version 3 emerges as a pretty clear winner. Just take a look at the noise in the background on the right. Version 3 wiped it out much better and brought back amazing fine detail in the bird. It's pretty astounding to be able to pull off a result like this in conditions that were this challenging. Okay, that was a pretty amazing result, but I'm sure you don't take photos only of birds, and neither do I. So if you're like me and you like to photograph everything that nature has to offer, you might be wondering, how does PureRAW 3 do for landscapes? I was wondering that too. Let's take a look at a cool image from Chile. How does DxO PureRAW 3 do for landscapes? A great case is a starry sky image, as these will exhibit luminance noise due to high ISO values and also color noise resulting from long exposures. I used an f4 lens for this shot and wanted to keep my shutter speed around 20 seconds to render the stars as sharp points of light. An ISO value of 6400 did the trick there, and a mix of flashes and flashlights helped give me a bit of light on the foreground trees, which was really interesting, and I had a lot of fun lighting this because I wanted to make that foreground light look as if it were coming from the Milky Way. So I had to place these lights kind of behind the scene, which was a fun challenge. There's the Milky Way in there, there's actually an active volcano in there, but the highlight of this photo is the amazing Araucaria forests of south central Chile. These trees in the genus Araucaria are truly relics of another age. Indeed, trees just like these grew during the Jurassic period, and some scientists even hypothesized that the straight trunks with the foliage clumped up top evolved as an effort to protect the leaves from being eaten by long-necked sauropods, such as the Brontosaurus. And on the flip side, there are scientists who think that the Brontosaurus evolved long necks in order to eat the Araucaria foliage, which is actually quite high in nutrients. In any case, it was insane to see these trees still exist today. In order to best optimize your RAW file, DxO wants to know what camera and what lens you use to shoot it. So you might see this dialog box. Just click Save, and you'll be on your way to enter the main processing module. So I've processed this shot in DxO PureRAW 2 and DxO PureRAW 3. And I want to take a look at the difference among the 3 photos, including my original RAW file. And one of the things you'll see right off as I go into survey mode here in Lightroom is that my original RAW file up at the top right compared to DxO Deep Prime XD on the bottom and version 2 on the top left, there's a little bit of difference in exposures there. That's not a big deal, and I'm going to come back to that at the end of the video. But for now, let's see where we started with my original RAW file on the left and the Deep Prime XD or version 3 PureRAW on the right. And you can see that it cleaned it up quite a bit and it looks great. So we know DxO will do a good job compared to the RAW file, but how does PureRAW 3 stack up against PureRAW 2 for this kind of an image? The PureRAW 2 version is on the right and the PureRAW 3 version is on the left. And one thing that these types of programs tend to suffer from when working with star images is that they tend to drop out stars from the sky as they're reducing the noise. And it looks to me that the Deep Prime XD or the version 3 does a much better job at keeping stars, and it did a much better job in terms of detail in the shadow areas in there. That's incredibly clean for ISO 6400. If you spend time out on the internets, the interweb, or even the information superhighway, you might have seen some discussions about DxO PureRAW making your images darker. As a DxO affiliate program member, I've actually reached out to my contacts there to ask them about this, but I haven't received an answer yet. By the way, this underexposure issue doesn't always happen, and some of you may never even have experienced the phenomenon. I didn't detect, for instance, any exposure difference between my original RAW files and the DNG files from DxO in the toucan and wood creeper photos that we looked at in this video just a couple of minutes ago. And while there was a slight difference in exposure values for the starry sky photo from Chile, it was fairly imperceptible. But sometimes there is a big difference. So let's see what's going on with this photo of a resplendent quetzal from the highlands of my home country, Costa Rica. Right, bonus time. You can see here that my RAW file in the middle is quite a bit brighter than either of the DxO DNG versions from PureRAW 2 and PureRAW 3. So what's up with this darkness? I've heard it suggested on the forums that it might have something to do with the color profile. And if you look at my RAW file, it has Camera Faithful applied, probably due to a preset I had. But Adobe Color was applied to both of the DxO versions. So let's take a look and see if changing the camera profile makes a difference. I went to the camera profile section of Lightroom and I'm going to set it to my Camera Faithful. Did it make a difference compared to the RAW file? Maybe slightly, but there's definitely something else going on here and nobody really knows what it is yet. Does it really matter for our photography, or is this just a lot of voices kind of howling into the wind out on the internet? I don't think it makes a big difference. Let's take a look here. This is my RAW file. And this is my DxO PureRAW version 3 DNG output file. Much darker at first glance, and you can tell. But let's go into Develop and take a look at my RAW file. Again, not too bad for 12,800, and this is also a fairly large crop, something that I don't do very often at all in my own photography, but I thought this was kind of a cool picture, not a prize winner for sure, but interesting to show off what's going on with this darkness issue. So let's zoom in there, and there's a lot of noise, muddy detail, but it's certainly brighter on first glance, the bird to a degree, but especially the background than the DxO PureRAW 3 output version. I'm going to zoom in. But what happens, I'm going to zoom back out, if we take the exposure up just a little bit to kind of match things, and that looks about right there, not too bad. And let's zoom in there and take a look, and you can see we have much better detail here than here, just to start with. And if I tried to match that, even going further by raising up the shadows in here, I know I could do this with some subject masking and fancy stuff, but good enough. You know, there we're kind of matching things more or less in terms of what the underside of the bird looks like. And man, we've got a lot better detail in here to work with right off the bat than we do with the RAW file, even though I had to raise the exposure by over a stop to match the tone and exposure of the original RAW file. If I add just a little bit of texture in here, a little bit of clarity where we've lightened, not at all a bad starting point for an ISO 12,800 shot. Okay, one final note on that underexposure issue before I wrap things up. I don't think it's a big deal at all. Even after brightening the DNG image from DxO, you're still working from a better starting point than you were when you were working with your camera's original RAW file, shot at super high ISOs and low light. So just tweak the exposure to taste and move on with your processing. Now, back to the big question, and the answer we've all been waiting for, is PureRAW 3 better than PureRAW 2? Well, it depends, but I think it is, and specifically, I think the new version offers 5 advantages. First, the interface offers a bit more control, especially in terms of fine-tuning that sharpening effect that DxO applies. For telephoto work, PureRAW 3 did a better job at reducing background noise, and for telephoto work as well, PureRAW 3 did much better at retaining fine subject detail, even at those crazy high ISO values like 25,600. For starry sky photos, I was very impressed at how PureRAW 3 removed noise but retained star detail. It didn't drop out many stars at all. And fifth, for landscape photos in general, it seems that PureRAW 3 will offer us more latitude in post-processing those shadow details, even murky shadow details. I was really impressed at how much clean shadow detail was revealed in the bark of those araucaria trees, even the super dim light on a moonless night in the Andes Mountains. So I'm convinced that DxO PureRAW 3 offers an important improvement over version 2. That said, should you make DxO PureRAW 3 a part of your nature photography workflow? You know, if you don't own any version of DxO PureRAW at the moment, I think you definitely should incorporate it, and you can buy it right now. If you already own DxO PureRAW version 2, the answer is less clear, but as I show in this video, it does seem that PureRAW 3 offers some significant improvements. Whether those improvements are compelling enough for you to pay the upgrade price of about $80 is of course completely up to you. So if you're still on the fence, I urge you to take advantage of DxO's 30-day free trial. Check it out, have fun processing, and then decide whether DxO PureRAW 3 will have a place in your nature photography workflow. And if you want to learn more about Lightroom, be sure to check out my 6-hour video series, The Complete Video Guide to Lightroom for the Nature Photographer. Yep, there's a link below, you know it. In future videos, I'll be doing a comparison of the latest versions of Topaz Denoise AI and DxO PureRAW 3 for both telephoto work and landscapes. And I'm also going to address the question of whether or not it's okay to process your RAW files in Lightroom before sending them over to DxO. But those are topics for another day, so take care, amigos, and I'll see you soon. Hey, you're still here, right? Yeah, I knew you would be, because probably you're firing off a complaint right now to the Better Business Bureau saying that I ripped you off and didn't provide that bonus content which I promised. And if you live in Latin America, you're probably firing off a missive to the Defensoría de los Habitantes, which sounds much more serious. So here's how I took this photo behind me of a king vulture. This is a wide-angle shot that I had in mind for a number of years, and about 6 or 7 years ago I was finally able to take the time and pull it off. This took me 6 days. I spent 6 days sitting in a hot blind in a tropical rainforest waiting for these guys to come down and feed on some bait that a lodge up in northern Costa Rica that's become quite famous puts out for these guys. This, of course, was a different kind of shot that the other people hadn't done, and it's the kind of thing that I really, really enjoy. And so the way I went about this is I set up my camera very, very close to the scene. I had a Canon 5D SR, Canon 16 to 35 millimeter f4 lens with a polarizing filter to really intensify that blue tropical sunny sky. And then, you know, one of the big keys was lighting the scene, because without flashes, the birds in the scene in the foreground generally were almost silhouettes. They were very, very dark. So I relied on 3 Godox flashes triggered by a Godox X Pro C transmitter to fire those flashes. I relied on that to light up the birds and the foreground of this scene, and I tried to make the lighting look fairly harsh in keeping with the tropical midday sun, which is pretty contrasty and harsh. And what I really loved about this photo is, for one thing, that I had to wait, like I said, 6 days, and finally got it on the last day, almost literally just as I was about to pack up and leave this area to go back home because I had other things to do. So it was an exercise in patience. I was happy with the flash work, but I really love how it has this kind of almost natural history museum diorama type of quality. So if you want to try out this sort of thing, I would urge you to plan your shot well, have a lot of patience, and learn how to use flash. I'll be doing a lot of flash videos right here on the Deep Green Photography YouTube channel in the future, so stay tuned for that.